photographer Hum in the Earth, signing in from Cape Town, South Africa. You're looking at Table Mountain, probably Cape Town's most distinctive feature. The indigenous Khoisan people called it Kurisawa, which meant rose from the ocean, because Cape Town is surrounded by two oceans. And that is why Europeans would bring their boats around Cape Town and stop in Cape Town as kind of a midway point to resupply, etc. In fact, that over there is an old Dutch castle. So the first European countries that came here with a regular consistency were the Portuguese, the Dutch, then the French, and eventually the English. And when the English were in power, they built this building here, which is the Town Hall of Cape Town. So evidently when the Europeans came here, they started creating farms to be able to grow the food that they would need to bring to the people that were coming on a boat. They started claiming land, which naturally did not go over very well with the indigenous people that were here first. This here is Dutch Reform Square. This used to be a Dutch church. It was also a place where a Dutch company would keep their slaves in really bad conditions. So they kept slaves here because even after the majority of the indigenous people were wiped out from smallpox, they still had a large need for work in Cape Town. So slaves would be brought from a lot of places, but mostly Mozambique, Madagascar, Asia, etc. Here's a statue of J.C. Smuts, who was a lawyer who basically negotiated the peace treaty between the Dutch and British. I heard that he was a smart man, but his views on the African people was not great. And right next to him here we have the Slave Lodge Museum, remembering slavery, which is one of the main reasons why Cape Town is such a pretty city, because of all the slave labor that was used to build it. British were in power following the peace treaty. They abolished slavery, but the Dutch did not want to end free labor, so they just moved further inland towards Natal, and the British let them do so. Later, the Dutch made a mistake of showing the British that they had found diamonds further inland, which then led the British to attack them to try to get a hold of the diamonds, with very little success at first, because the British had red and white uniforms as opposed to the Dutch, who were wearing camouflage uniforms. So it was a pretty easy victory for the Dutch. Brits found out that the Dutch had now discovered platinum and silver and took another go at it, and were actually successful this time thanks to the use of snipers. A ultimate treaty that was the Union of South Africa was signed, and so basically made one country that now had three capital cities, being Cape Town, Pretoria, and so now we're in the Company Gardens, a big park in downtown Cape Town. actually used to all be farmland, and this building specifically was a big tool shed. And the owner of this farm was a really big fan of wine, and actually began South Africa's prosperous wine production. It's one of the countries that makes the most wine in the world. But unfortunately, after he started making wine, he would start paying his workers with a little bit of money and a lot of wine, which to some might not sound bad, but unfortunately it created a lot of alcoholism in the area, specifically with the workers working on the farms. But it wasn't just wine being produced in this area. Specifically here in the company gardens, there were a lot of fruits, including pears. Here we have Cape Town's oldest resident, a saffron pear tree that is over 300 years old. It does not bear fruit, and it is on crutches as a preservation effort by the city of Cape Town. The High Court Civil Annex, where the Registration Act was signed here in Cape Town, which was basically the beginning of apartheid. And if you're not familiar with what that means, it's basically the segregation of people of different races. So there were initially 11 categories that could be put into 4 main categories, with decreasing levels of rights. So the first was whites or Europeans. The second was mixed, so people that were mixed white and another color. And the third was called Indian, which was basically anybody from Asia. And the fourth being the native African people of black skin. So when it was first implemented, only Europeans were allowed in the downtown area of the city, and people of color were moved to neighborhoods outside of the downtown area. And this system of division took place in the whole of South Africa from 1940 to 1990, more or less. And the impetus for creating this law was the Europeans trying to, quote-unquote, protect their investments in the downtown area. So only people who owned land or were renting it were allowed to reside in the center of Cape Town. This church here is of important historical significance because it was the church of the first ever black Archbishop, Minister Tutu. This was important because there had never been any people of color with high ranking in Cape Town. And this only happened because he had the backing of the head of the church in England, or else he would have not been appointed to such a high rank. It was also important because, like I mentioned, if you were of color, you were not allowed in the downtown area, but there were a few exceptions that would allow you to come into center town. And one of these was for religious purposes. So a lot of people would come to church because they obviously wanted to practice their faith, but also so that they could come downtown. Protesting, on the other hand, was not a allowable reason to come downtown if you were colored, but it still happened. And when you would come downtown and you were protesting, the police would spray purple paint on people who were protesting to identify them for arrest. And this is actually the story behind the artist Prince's song Purple Rain. This is the House of Parliament. There's two actually in South Africa, one here in Cape Town, the other in Pretoria, one of South Africa's other capitals. And here is where the political figure Hendrik Verhoek was assassinated by Dimitri Tifander. Dimitri Tifander was actually maybe the only person to actually ask for a lower rank, as he was classified as a European. Dimitri was working in the House of Parliament as a messenger, and one day he bought a bunch of newspapers, and in the final newspaper had a blade, and was handing out newspapers to the various members of Parliament until he kept the last one for Hendrik Verhoek. And when he handed him the newspaper, removed the blade and assassinated him. And since Verhoek was an important figure behind apartheid, this event was called the assassination of apartheid. So across this street here, it used to be what was called District 6, which was previously just outside of the downtown area. So this was a neighborhood where people from all walks of life who weren't allowed downtown began building their lives, many of which were freed slaves. But one day, as the city was getting bigger, the powers that be decided that the downtown area needed to expand, and they did a forced removal of all the people living in District 6, which was quite a big neighborhood, and pushed them further out of the city to an area called Cape Flats. And this was a process that took part throughout South America. It was estimated that 3.5 million people were removed from their homes. And an interesting statistic is that so the white Europeans were a very small minority of the population percentage, but claimed 80% of South Africa's land as theirs. So a bit of an unbalance there. That's a statue of Nelson Mandela, and this is where he gave his a really important speech here in this square. It was in 1990, after he had been released from prison. This was technically right after apartheid had been abolished, but things don't change that easily. So society wasn't really sure how to move forward, since it had been so used to segregation. So a lot of people were waiting for this moment to hopefully receive some guidance as to how to move forward. And at this time, South Africa was very kind of unsteady, and it was almost on the brink of a civil war. So a lot of people were kind of expecting some directions moving in that direction of how to kind of prepare for a fight or something. But what actually happened was Nelson Mandela got on the stand and said, to move forward, we have to all love and forgive each other. And this was not the expected response. People were a bit confused at first, so he gave a personal example, saying, so Nelson Mandela had just been released from a 27-year sentence, and he said that he had forgiven every South African, including those who had imprisoned him. And he said, well, if I could do it, you can do it too. And that was a powerful message that resonated with the people of South Africa, especially the people of color. And from there, a lot of progress was made. So I hope you enjoyed this city tour and history of Cape Town. A bit of a heavy one, but a topic that's good to know about. Always good to know about history, so you don't make the same mistakes again. And on a lighter note, I made another video that will be coming up next of the V&A waterfront in Cape Town. So this is kind of a trendy spot for shopping, eating, etc. So that was just kind of a fun video exploring that area, as well as at least another video that I will do of a really scenic route high up on Cape Town, overlooking the ocean and the city. So that will be my video, kind of bicycling south through Cape Town. So that should be a pretty beautiful one, so you'll definitely want to catch that one. I was here at the beginning of my journey, attempting to bicycle from Cape Town to Cairo, Egypt. Before that, I bicycled from Canada to Argentina, and all those videos are available on this same channel, Hum of the Earth. You can check out my playlist to see the countries that you're interested in. And if you'd like to see an interactive map of everywhere that I went and everything that I've done and seen, you can see that over at my website, followthehumoftheearth.com, where you can click on the different locations and see the different blog posts and videos I've made of these places. And if you'd like to follow my continuing adventures, you can do so by clicking on the red subscribe button below the video. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.